All right, New York Giants fans, this is Tim with Online Big Blue, bringing you the best in New York Giants sports talk and entertainment. It's funny because the offseason, you always think the offseason there won't be a lot to talk about, that you won't have a plethora of information to talk about. But you know what? You'll always do, and there's so many topics. And one thing I wanted to talk about, we've talked about this in the past, but Jason Garrett. Jason Garrett, of course, is not going to be the LA Chargers head coach. From all looks of it, he will be back with the New York Giants. That's good, bad, or indifferent. Do you think? I don't think the Giants are going to get rid of him because of the fact that everyone. Now, of course, I could be 100% wrong, but you want to build consistency with your young quarterback. You talk about Daniel Jones and how Daniel Jones has the trust of the franchise. And that's great and all, and that's wonderful. But, I also would like to point out Daniel Jones has the trust of the franchise because he's got a $15 million dead cap number in this year, 2021, and almost $8.5 million in 2022. So of course you're going to have faith in the franchise quarterback when he's carrying almost a $23 million dead cap number over 2 years. So yeah, you're gonna have to have faith in him. And that's why I laugh, because people are like, why don't they just dump him? Well, there's 15 million reasons why they don't dump him in 2021. So he's going to be our quarterback, good, bad, or indifferent. But I find it interesting that a lot of the blame for Daniel Jones, for some fans, falls on Jason Garrett. And now the question is Jason Garrett hindering the career of Daniel Jones? Now, Pat Shurmur, for all of his faults as a head coach, and he had 2 tenures as head coaches, one in Cleveland, of course, one in New York, he was always a good quarterback guy. If he had a quarterback that he felt he could work with, he was an okay offensive coordinator. He had one really good season with Minnesota as an offensive coordinator, but he was always a good quarterback builder, or getting the most out of the quarterback talent that he had. And I can't take that away from Pat Shurmur for all of his faults. Jason Garrett, if you go back to his career, has kind of had the same maturation of other quarterbacks. Now, he was gifted Tony Romo, and he was gifted Tony Romo more towards the end of his career, and Tony had some injuries. But you know what? Tony had some of his better seasons with Jason Garrett, not calling the plays, but being the head coach. And then you look at the fact that he basically also had Dak Prescott. Now, whoever thought, then everyone will say, well, I thought Dak was going to be that type of player coming out of college. When he was coming out of school, I thought he was going to be that guy. Especially when coming out of Mississippi State, that big college. And I'm not going to say that people weren't right about Dak, but there was a lot more people that were not as enthused about Dak Prescott than there were that were enthused. But Jason Garrett got his quarterback in 2016, rookie quarterback. They went 13-3. Dak threw for over 3,600 yards, 23 touchdowns, and only 4 interceptions, completed 67% of his passes. Now, a lot of people will equate his success to Ezekiel Elliott, and they'll point to the fact that when games, especially early in Dak's career, when Zeke wasn't in the game, Dak's statistics, he sagged a little bit. But it was funny because they still found a way to win. Dak's worst season, full starter, was 8-8. Which was in 19, which cost Jason Garrett his job. But in his worst record season-wise, at 8-8, he still threw for 4,900 yards, 65% of his passes, 30 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. Now, a lot of people say, well, Scott Linehan had him rolling. But you can't, and it's the same thing I tell Giant fans. You can't say Joe Judge is the CEO of everything and has his hand in everything. And then you can't turn that around and say, well, when Jason was in Dallas, that he was a CEO and he basically had his hand in everything, but you don't give him credit for that. But you give Joe Judge credit for having his hand in everything with the Giants. So, you can't have the double standards. You have to be fair. And I think a lot of times as fans, we don't want to be fair. We just don't like a guy. We don't like Jason Garrett because he's the clapper. We don't like him because of his hair. We don't like him because of the way he looks. We don't look at his actual performance. He did not have a bad career in Dallas. Was it a great career? No, he had playoff woes, but he was the 2016 Coach of the Year. He did go third. Let's see, he went 12-4, 13-3, 9-7, 10-6. his worst season was the 15 season where he went 4-12, but then he followed up with a 13-3 year. Yeah, he had a bunch of 8-8s in there, but not every coach is going to have a winning season. You can't blame everything on the head coach. Sometimes it's the defense coordinator, sometimes it's the offense coordinator. Sometimes you have to blame the players. So the thing is, going back to blaming the players, we have a built-in scapegoat. Our Giant fans have a built-in scapegoat for Daniel Jones and why he's not excelling to the aspirations of the fans. And that's Jason Garrett, because Jason Garrett's the clapper, because Jason Garrett doesn't know how to call the plays, because Jason Garrett doesn't know how to do this. Well, Jason Garrett also did not create the turnovers. Jason Garrett also didn't create the fumbles. Jason Garrett also did not throw the interceptions. Jason Garrett didn't lose to Chicago 13-17 when someone threw 40 times for only 241 yards. Jason Garrett didn't whiff in the Tampa game. Jason Garrett didn't collapse in the Dallas game. Jason Garrett didn't collapse in the Tampa game. That was more of a situation of the quarterback. Now, I'm not fully blaming Daniel Jones for anything, but the thing is, you can only call the plays. The players need to execute. Later in the season, did Jason Garrett seem to go into a shell? Yes, he did with the offensive play calling. But I think a lot of that had to do, of course, with Colt McCoy. And I think a lot of that had to also do with the lack of trust the Giant organization had for a period of time with Daniel Jones. And that lack of trust does not just come from the offensive coordinator position. That lack of trust is also coming from the head coach. But people don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about the fact that maybe the Giants as a whole realize the fact that, this is not Daniel Jones' year right now. We're not going to put the ball in his hands to win. It's not like Eli. Eli, you always knew they were going to put the ball in his hands at the end of that game and try to win it no matter what. And Daniel Jones, it's not that way. It was really not. I mean, first the kid's got to beat a team with a winning record. That's the first problem. I mean, and second, he's got to put together consistency. And everyone will say, well, look at that stretch of games where he did not have any turnovers, those 4 games. Okay, let's see those 4 games. Threw the ball 34 times for 212 yards and a touchdown. Threw the ball 28 times and no touchdowns. Threw the ball, 27 times for 213 yards and no touchdowns. Threw the ball. Oh, well, no, then the next game was the loss because that was the Arizona game. But in those 4 games, he didn't have any turnovers. The numbers aren't mind-blowing. The most he threw for in those 4 games was 244 yards. And he threw the ball 34, 28, 27, 21. I'm sorry, he threw the ball. He threw the ball. Yeah. I mean, no, I should rephrase it. No, I was right. I was right on that. I can't think this morning because the Black Rifle hasn't jumped in yet. So I think the big question out of all of this is, whose fault is this? Is it the fact that we in New York are just overestimating the strength of Daniel Jones? Are we just picking on Jason Garrett because we need a scapegoat? And a lot of times with Giant fans, that's the problem. We are looking for, there's the music again. We are looking for a scapegoat. A lot of times we don't want to look in the mirror and look to the fact that and I've talked about this before, we don't want to look in the mirror and think that we made a mistake. That we made a mistake with Daniel Jones. That Daniel Jones might not be the guy. Because the problem is a lot of people on YouTube, because I'm probably the oldest Giant creator on YouTube. Went to school with Moses. But that's okay. Dated Nefertiti. But you know what? That was my freshman year in high school. But the problem is, you only knew one quarterback, and I've said this before. And it's a youth thing. There's no derogatory statement there. You only knew one quarterback. You only knew 16 years of Eli Manning. You don't remember, and I've talked about this before. You don't remember the Dave Browns. You've heard the stories of Dave Brown, but you don't know the Dave Browns. The Kent Grahams, the Danny Cannell, the Jeff Rutledges. You don't know those. You know the legend of Jeff Hostetler, but not what followed up to that, to that crescendo in his career. You don't know the Craig Mortons, which I've talked about, the Joe Pisarchiks. I think I mentioned Scott Bruner. You don't know those names. You will go. You know you don't know how long it took. You know what it took for us to find Kerry Collins and how we got lucky with that when we made it to that Super Bowl in 2020. I was there. The only Super Bowl I've been to for the Giants, and we lost. That's why I don't go to Super Bowls anymore when the Giants win. Oh, that's not true. I went in '86, and they won. That's right. It's on 1-for-1. But that's the problem. You don't know the history of the quarterbacks. So you are looking for, and it's just human nature, you're looking for someone else to blame. And that someone else to blame is easily going to be Jason Garrett. Is Jason Garrett perfect? Hell no. Is he a good offensive coordinator? I'm going to say yes. Because he called some fantastic plays and they had some fantastic game plans this season. And I'm looking at the totality of the season. I'm not looking at the last 6 weeks. Because they were trying to make the playoffs, so they kind of went into a shell and they tried to win it with defense. And that's just basically what the Giants did, because they didn't trust Daniel Jones. That is a fair, honest assessment. But you can't also say that Daniel Jones needs a better offensive line, he's a better tight end, he's going to need a better wide receiver, because he'll be so much better if he has all those things. And, healthy Saquon Barkley. You can't say that without then saying the same things about Jason Garrett. Jason Garrett staying will bring consistency to Daniel Jones' career, and we will be able to know in 2021 if he is the quarterback of the future. He may be, he may not be, but we cannot change the consistency. And we cannot keep looking for scapegoats for a guy that we drafted 6th overall. We need to, this is year 3, we need to start looking in the mirror at Daniel Jones. And again, this is Tim with Online Big Blue, bringing you the best of New York Giants sports talk and entertainment. And as always, if you could if you can subscribe, if you can ring that bell, you know what that means, that'd be awesome.